Hello again, Michael Ware with the Iowa Firearms Coalition. We're bringing you something very special today. We've got Warrior Wednesday, but our guest, our sister, if you will, is Sara Weaver. Some of you may know of a place called, well, I'll let Sara go to. It's not actually a place, but Ruby Ridge and everything that's surrounded that, and some Iowans that moved to a place of simplicity, and things become unnecessarily complex. So with that, Sara Weaver, hello. Thank you for coming on IFC's Warrior Wednesday. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll delve into the conversation.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you having me on. I haven't had a whole lot of chance to get to know you, but from the little bit that I've gotten to know you, I just really have sensed that you really have the heart of a shepherd, and that just speaks volumes to me. It's kind of what I look for in people is, do they have a heart of a protector, or is there something else kind of going on there? And I really sensed a heart of a protector in you. So I appreciate that about you, and I appreciate you having me on your podcast. I don't do lots of podcasts, or I haven't in the past. It's not easy for me to talk about Ruby Ridge. But I see how necessary it is, and I see the importance of it. So thank you for having me on today.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your kind words. I remember reading a book. I think it was given to me by a former pastor, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, The Cost of Discipleship, or something like that, a title to that effect. And I remember he gave it to me, and I'm like, what would I need to use this for? And I started reading it, and I realized discipleship's what I'm called to do. It's what we're called to do. And it's hard to be a shepherd. It's hard to be a disciple. So I thought that it wasn't going to be too bad. Boy, was I wrong. But it's also satisfying and gratifying. And even when it's tough, it's worth doing. So it was very kind of you to say that. Thank you for that. So how do we know Ruby Ridge? And how do we know what it is? And can you give us a taste of a little bit of that portion of your life's journey? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, it's very difficult to sum it up in a few sentences, or even 15 minutes or half an hour. It's something that when an interviewer sits down with me, it takes 4.5 hours for me to recount. Mm-hmm. So it was a terrible, terrible thing that happened to my family in August of 1992 in North Idaho. It changed the course of my life forever. My little brother, Sam, he was shot in the back. And then the next day, my mom, Vicki, was shot on our front porch through her head, holding my little sister as I was standing right next to her. And an 11-day siege took place after that. And it's what the world knows as the federal siege at Ruby Ridge. And it's over 30 years that it's taken place, but people still remember. And it was just such a terrible shock, I think, not just to my family, but to the country, that it has been remembered. And I've spent all of those years working to heal from it, to help people not forget it, to learn from mistakes that were made there, so that so that it never happens again, because I would never want anyone else to experience what I experienced there. It was horrific. I believe it was unnecessary. And nobody wins. Nobody wins. So
I didn't think that having you on, Sara, I didn't think that having you on would be this hard, but I'm finding it a little tougher than what I thought, because I'm thinking about these things. I can remember my first year in college and just getting ready and just going when all these things hit the national stage, and me kind of as a kid who didn't really pay much attention to the news, like, dude, this is crazy, and I don't understand, and what's going on. And of course, and I'll admit to you freely, I'm really, really sorry about this, but I said to myself immediately, I'm like, why don't they just come out? I don't understand. And so there are lots of things that we just don't know. We just don't understand. And I wasn't able to place myself in somebody else's shoes. I didn't try either. So I owe many apologies for things like that. But we're given time. We're offered examples of what grace are. We're encouraged to do that with others. We know we live better when we offer people forgiveness. And so I don't know how to think about that in the terms that you have, because I haven't experienced something like that. And so I would never say something like, oh, Sarah, I understand, because I don't. And out of weakness, I would tell you, I don't want to understand that, really, because that would mean that I would have to experience it. And I think that I'd like for all of us to avoid those things. But that's part of the reason that we've asked you to come to Iowa to our Second Amendment rally, to our Second Amendment Day at the Capitol, and speak at our IFC-PAC supper, because this goes to the heart for many Second Amendment advocates, as the understanding of government tyranny, if you will, that people place themselves in positions of power and they do dastardly things, and we should endeavor day and night to avoid that. And the weakness associated with going along with things when we know we had not to, whether that's government or your job or in your church or when you're driving down the road. If you know you're not supposed to do it, don't. You and I would think, Sarah, that wouldn't be that hard, that we could back off the throttle a little bit and not do the things that we know we had not to. But boy, we do. So it can be ugly out there. Anyway, there's a significant Iowa connection with Ruby Ridge. Most of the people listening to this will probably have a good idea of what we're talking about, if not remember it vividly. But the Weaver family originated in Iowa. Am I wrong about that?
No, we actually did. I was born in Cedar Falls, Iowa. My mother is from Fort Dodge, and I have tons of family in Iowa. So I guess we had a heart's pull towards the west, so we migrated a little bit.
I can remember in subsequent years running into your dad. He was kind enough to sign a book for me. I would see him occasionally at a gun show. I think I mentioned to you, I ran into him once. I'm certain it was, everybody refers it to as Junction, but it was Grand Junction. So it was between Ames and Jefferson. I can remember running into him there maybe a time or two. But I talked with a gentleman, gosh, it's been the day before yesterday, and he was a deputy, like armed security at one of the gun shows or something like that. And standing by the exits, and Randy walks by and says, "Hey, you like tomatoes?" And my buddy Dave says, "Well, sure. Who doesn't? Well, come with me." And out to the car they went, open up the trunk, and I don't know what he had, baskets or some sort of sack or something like with a bunch of tomatoes in it, and hand him a bunch, and off he went. So I mean, there's a strong Iowa connection, not only because you were from here or a lot of the families from here, Iowa per se, but there are memories and there are instances and life shared. And so I think that Iowans consider your story or the story about this an Iowan story. They really do, Sarah. I got to be honest with you. They take ownership with it when I visit with people about it or I hear them talking about it. And I think that that's very important, because in order for us to empathize and come alongside somebody, we need to have a shared connection and some feeling there. And I'm glad that we have that. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Iowa people, Midwest people are amazing. There's nothing like Midwest people. They're extra nice, I guess you could say.
Usually. Now,
yeah.
When you and I are driving down the interstate, the guy that deliberately drives 65 and a half in the left lane, I don't know how nice he is. But aside from that guy, yeah, I think that Midwesterners are pretty good.
Yeah, they're they're different. I think they're different. They're great people.
I agree. So I mentioned it earlier. I'll mention it again. This is the official announcement that, and I should go look to make sure that I'm right before I say this. I think that we have the Second Amendment Day. Let me put on my calendar here to be double sure. There it is. Okay. Official announcement. Sara Weaver is going to be our keynote speaker at IFC's Second Amendment Day, February 10th, 2026. So her and her husband are kind enough to come to town. I'm sure there'll be no snow. It'll be unseasonably warm. I'm predicting 60s minimum. And you'll come into town, visit with everybody at the Capitol, and then buy tickets, or people can buy tickets rather, for the IFC-PAC supper. And it's my understanding, you'll have to fill me in on this, Sara, but it's my understanding you're willing to do a question and answer and a little bit more intimate discussion at the PAC supper. What might that be like?
Well, like I said, I don't do a lot of podcasts. A friend of mine posted something the other day, and I'm not sure who the quote came from, but it said there are people that just have to say something, and there are people that have a lot to say. And so whenever I get ready to speak, I don't want it to be just because I have to say something. So I think there are a lot of questions people have they probably want to ask me, and this would be a great opportunity, for them to do that and in person. So.
Well, we'll look forward to that. Again, that's the IFC Second Amendment Day, February 10th, 2026. Sara Weaver is going to come visit with us, and then she's going to open herself up just a little bit at the PAC supper. So we encourage people to come, be respectful of what you're going to say and how you're going to carry yourself. We're going to have a very nice time, and so I'm looking forward to it. Now, in the meantime, and in preparation for this,
I am excited about this, Michael. So thank you for inviting me, first of all, to be your speaker there, and thank you for giving me that platform to be able to share with people in Iowa. It's going to be a very special time, I think, for me, just the location of it in general, and then just being able to connect with people on a one-on-one level, and be able to have just a really great conversation. And it's kind of a homecoming for me, so I'm excited about that too.
I'm glad. I visited with Mark a little bit about it. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for accepting our invitation. We're glad that you're going to come. Now, as we've discussed, these things are also very personal. We got to take them into context. So I hope that people will understand that when they listen, and they'll bring that to bear. Now, in the meantime, in preparation for this, whatever else, I'm sharing the screen now for those of you who are watching, for those of you that are listening. It's rubyridge2freedom.com. You have a site here where people can pick up books. They can go follow you. They can see what's going on. You've got True Social, biography, other things like that. I'd like for people to go check those things out and pay attention. Now, I see that there's a couple things that you've got in here from recent periodicals. Where else you were kind enough to send a few to me that were recent, like what, in the last few weeks. So I don't know if how quickly those will be up on your site, but I can link them later if you'd like. But I appreciated hearing some of these people's stories alongside yours. And basically the refining of one's faith. And that's central, as you've made it very clear, as have I, that's central to your life. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have been on, like I said, a journey for the past 30 years of just, I would call the first 10 years of it just trying to survive my own emotions, from day to day and sometimes minute to minute. And that's really not living. It's surviving. And I had to, like, that can't continue forever. There comes a point where you come to the end of that, and you come to the end of yourself. And for me, it was really literally a matter of, am I going to make it or not? sort of thing. And I took one tiny step towards the Lord and opened up a Bible. I was very angry at God for a long time, and thought religion was the reason that this had happened to my family and all of these things. And tried to do life my way, tried to acquire the things and do the steps, and all of the things that the world tells you will make you happy, and the things that you should do. You should build your dream house and get married and have a child, and all of the white picket fence and the American dream and all of those things. And it left me empty, and I hit a wall. And I hit a wall with PTSD and postpartum depression and all of those things. And now I had a little boy involved that I loved very dearly, but was struggling as a young mom. And we didn't talk about those sorts of things when I was going through it. And I didn't have my own mom at the time to lean on and, get support from. And I needed her desperately at that time, and I didn't have her. So I came to the end of myself, and I thought, what would she do? And her faith in God was so strong. And that's what stood out to me about her. And so that little nudge was, what would mom do? And when I was about 7 years old, my parents had been attending a church, and I had memorized one verse for a piece of candy. It was like, I wasn't memorizing it for the verse, but I was being bribed, and I was all about it. So I memorized John 3:16 when I was 7 years old, and I didn't think about the verse for years after that. I mean, until I was a young mom myself. And in that moment, I was in a moment of desperation where I'll just say it out loud because people go through it all the time. At that time, I was contemplating whether or not life was even worth living. And I would look at my son and think, you cannot leave him motherless, because you know what it's like to grow up without a mother. And for me, that was not an option. But I was so just pulverized. I just knew I had to do something, had to change, or I wasn't going to make it. And so I thought of my mom, and I thought of her faith, and I went and I got my little Sunday school Bible out that I hadn't looked at in 20 years. And I opened it, and that verse I hadn't thought about since I was 7 years old popped into my mind. And that was the first place I went in the Bible. And Jesus rescued me. And he lifted the pain and the weight and everything I'd been carrying off of my shoulders in a second. And he breathed life into me in that moment. And I read John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. And I read the second verse, John 3:17, for God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but so that through him the world might be saved. And it dealt with everything. Those two verses dealt with everything I was struggling with. I was struggling with God's condemnation. I was struggling with death. I was struggling with, why did this happen to my mom? Why did this happen to my little brother? Why am I still even here? What is the purpose? What is the point of my life?
Mm-hmm.
And I was struggling with survivor's guilt and all of these things. I mean, not to mention all of everything that had just come down on top of our family after it happened. Just heaps of shame. Every time I turned around, there was something in the newspaper, and you would go, I would go on, and I would try and live a normal life, and then something else would come out, or something else would happen, or it would just, I could take a few steps forward in quote unquote normalcy. What is normal? I don't even know, but wanting to live in some form of peace, I guess you could say, but it was always being interrupted. And so when I read those two verses and I ran face first into Jesus for the first time, it began some true healing. And I was a mess for a while. There was a lot for him to deal with. There was a lot for him to clean up. But I just kept chasing him because he's life. He was life to me. And it changed everything for me. It turned my life completely around.
I never tire of hearing these stories, and I think the average person would be shocked how many people of faith are immersed in Second Amendment culture. I'm not sure I can explain that other than maybe the pursuit of truth. When you read the words of the Second Amendment, I think it's pretty safe to say that many people understand them. They understand what the words actually mean. They understand what they were in the contextual sense of when they were offered, the fact that they didn't change in ideology from then to now, and everything associated with it. So it makes it pretty easy to grasp when you actually read it and apply anything but relativism. Well, when you do that, it's not a stretch to find people that think that way or understand it that way, are almost always of faith. There are a ton of people that come on this show, that come on this program, if you will, that are part of Warrior Wednesday that openly talk about their faith, and they're quite willing to do that. I mean, Sarah, I've had SEAL team members on here. I've had governors, all kinds of high-level politicians. I've had the interim attorney general of the United States on this program before. I mean, and these people are quite willing to tell you about what and how their moral compass is calibrated. And I absolutely love that. I'm so glad that so many are unashamed. It's a breath of fresh air. And I think that that's probably a big part of why we do what we do. So I appreciate you saying, listen, I was a mess and I needed to be unmessy. And there was only one way that I was going to accomplish that. And thank goodness it came to pass. So thank you for that. Thank you for having the bravery to share it.
Not to be cliche, but he takes our mess and turns it into a message.
Yeah, you're right. So why do you think it is? I have an opinion, and I don't know if it's relative to this, but why do you think it is that people look at the Weaver story and immediately associate it with the Second Amendment? Have you given that much thought? Because you're being called out of wherever it is that you were doing, whatever it is that you were doing, into the public sphere a little bit more. And I've noticed that you haven't done that for a number of years, and you're beginning to again. Thankful for that, by the way. But I think that there's a great Second Amendment call for you, for your story, that surrounds your story. Why is that?
That's a great question. I understand why it's been connected to the Second Amendment circle. There's many reasons for that. One of them obviously was, the sawed-off shotgun and that whole situation, the entrapment there, the fact that if my dad would have had a illegal tax stamp for it, then it would have been legal. Just that in itself, and then the nature of what happened. My dad also, he really appreciated guns, and I wanted to share this with you too. As far as my childhood was concerned, I was thinking about this and my dad the other day. When we left Iowa at that time, I mean, I don't know if their gun culture went very far beyond hunting. And then it, to me, I don't remember it being very, much in the forefront back then. But my parents, when after the siege happened and the media got a hold of everything, and they printed such extremes about my family as far as the guns that my dad owned and how everything happened and how everything went down, that it sounded so horrible to the average person. And they showed pictures, like they laid out all his guns out on the ground on this sheet, and that picture went everywhere. And I would sit and look at that picture and I'd say, I can count 3 of the BB guns that we had in that picture. And 2 of them looked like mini 14s. I mean, they were made to look like they were real, but they were BB guns. Then there's 222 rifles there. There's a single shot shotgun. There's a 30-06. And in my mind, it wasn't this. These were tools. These were tools to me because of how my dad raised us as children. So we moved to an extremely remote area. We had very real dangers as far as wild animals are concerned. The average Iowan who's in suburbia and goes down to Hy-Vee every day is not dealing with those things. They are dealing with, traffic and things like that. And I don't remember there being a ton of crime even back when I was young and my parents were moving. It was pretty safe neighborhoods, I think, from what I can remember. But we were moving to a very real and dangerous situation as children. And my dad wanted us to be safe. And my mom wanted us to be safe and at the same time have the freedom to move about like we were back in our backyard in Iowa. Right. And so with my dad's background, with him, he was a gun lover. He knew he would have guns in our household. He knew his children would be around them. And so he taught us from a very young age gun safety that was pounded into us to the point where this is a tool. I want you to have it to be able to protect yourself if there's ever anything that comes at you, whether it's a bear, whether it's a mountain lion, whatever. But if I catch you mishandling, if I catch you misusing this tool, hell hath no fury, basically. And my dad's wrath would come upon us because he understood the dangers of it. And he wanted to be able to have his children be around weapons, but in a safe manner, because they were a tool that we needed for our daily survival. And so I think about that now, and I think about our culture now, and the responsibility we have to our kids to teach them properly, whether it's the sanctity of life, whether it is gun safety, because you have them in your household. You have a responsibility to your children to raise them in the way they should go. Yeah. And so my dad did that with us. We were very young children and we were carrying guns and we were not playing with them. We weren't being irresponsible with them towards each other because we knew that was like the ultimate sin with my dad is you don't mess around with this. They're dangerous. They're a tool. They are necessary, but you don't mess around with them. And I think we've lost that. I think we have lost that with video games. I think we've lost that with movies. I think we've lost the sensitivity. I think we've lost the sanctity of life. I think we have lost a lot along the way. And that is very concerning. And I think we as responsible gun owners need to speak more on that. I think it's important. They're not a novelty. They're not something that you just have around because it's cool and you take photos with them on, and post them on Instagram. They are a tool and they're a deadly tool, but they also are a necessary tool. And so I think my dad he had it right in that situation with us because we were a gun household and he had little kids running around, but he taught us very early on just how, important it was that we were extremely mindful and careful. And then he knew he could trust us with that. And he did trust us with that.
You have to do this. This is part of it. There are aspects of gun ownership that revolve around what you and I would agree is total responsibility. And so you've got to educate, you've got to practice, you've got to do these things, or the risks multiply very quickly, and you don't want what happens as a result. I mean, the consequences of not doing those things well is a big, big problem. So you need to have safety lessons. You need to, like you said, you need to have it beat into your head. You need to absorb it. This is what you do, and this is what you don't do. But I mean, I can see where you were living. You need tools to dispatch critters. You need tools for protection. You need tools to put food on the table. That's what they are. No more, no less.
It's like a chainsaw. A chainsaw is a very dangerous and deadly but necessary tool. Those things can kick back. They can take off a limb. They can kill you in a second. Mm-hmm. And so we have tools in our lives on the daily that are incredibly important that we have, but we have to use them properly, and we have to talk about using them properly, and we have to teach people properly. And if you're going to have them, it's a responsibility. So this is another thing I wanted to share because I feel it's very important. And you and I talked about this a little bit before we started the podcast, with what we've all been experiencing this past week with the loss of Charlie Kirk. And I went to dinner with my son. My son is a law enforcement professional. He's been in it. He's 24. He's been in it now for 4 years. He started out in the detention center, and he's just progressed from there. But he is extremely smart, and he's a young person who's experiencing this incredible trauma now that millions have experienced. It's been twofold for me because experiencing it was very triggering for me. I've been in the midst of it with my family members, so it's very personal to me. It's very traumatic. And that's the first part of it. The second part of it is that I'm grieving not only for what I witnessed personally, but for the millions of people now that are going to have to try and reconcile this and heal from this. It changes you. It's a trauma, and it changes you. And so it was important to me to talk to my son and get his perspective as a younger person. And I asked him, I said, how do you feel about everything? And he said, Mom, he said, I agree with Charlie's stance. And if you have to take the whole video in context, and you have to watch Charlie's video about car deaths, and there being 50,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And I took notes on what my son actually told me because I wanted to quote him correctly. And he said, I agree with Charlie on the gun debate. Drivers cause 50,000 deaths a year. We hand 14-year-old children keys to a car. Driving is a privilege. It is not a right. And I thought, wow, that's profound. Now, he is on the street every day dealing with the public, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Every day, all day long. He said, I'm not concerned about law-abiding citizens with guns. I'm concerned about the criminals, because the criminals will always find a way to get a gun. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, I said, are you okay if I share this? And he said, yeah, go for it, because I think it's important that we listen to our young people right now. They do have a voice, and a lot of times my voice was shut down when I was younger. And so I think even as my generation, Gen X and beyond, I think it's important we give our young people a voice in these times, because they are going through things in this world that I never thought we would see or have to deal with, and it grieves me for them. And so I respect I respect my son so much for what he deals with every day on the daily basis, and I'm so proud of him. And I catch people saying, I get hate from people, oh, your son's a cop and things like that, and it's like, I want more good cops in places of places of law enforcement. I want the good guys there, because in every organization you're going to have both. And we need more. You've got people doing the right thing and people doing the wrong thing. I don't care what organization you are in. And we need people doing the right thing more. And so.
Well, I'm glad that your son's willing to do that. I have a lot of people that I run into that are, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but a few that are not happy with law enforcement. They're like, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. I'm like, well, I don't like it when people overstep their boundaries and whatever else either. I'm not going to ever condone that. But, oh, by the way, put yourself in the position of the average policeman, and especially those people who have what you and I might call a beat. It might be a little different with a state trooper that have these much larger areas to cover. But if you're talking about a county guy or a city guy, Sarah, they know the same offenders. They've been at the same house 16 times for domestic complaints. They've been there. They know them. A lot of times they have relationships with these people because first name basis, because they've been there so often for so much tomfoolery, and they deal with this on a daily basis. Then they see the guy that gets blasted and beats up his wife, run out there and then drive over a van load of kids when he's blasted and he's drunk, right? And so then the same officer is there on the side of the road and administering chest compressions to the point of, operating on pure adrenaline. Gets done, tries to go back to the office and write up everything. And then one of his buddies calls in and the captain comes out and says, I need you to pull a double. I mean, this is the way that these people live. This is what they do, and it's very, very hard. I have a tremendous respect for law enforcement because of the pain and anguish and the stamina associated with doing the job. So I tell people that, I am the first person, Sarah. I'm the first person to push back when Uncle Sam oversteps their boundaries, or they walk outside of the mission statement, or the mission statement's wrong and needs to be addressed. I am not going to give those people a pass, and I'm not going to give that action a pass. But I have a tremendous empathy and compassion for people that do this kind of work.
Accountability is important. Mm-hmm. And I think accountability a lot of times doesn't happen. We may be stepping into something new as far as accountability goes in these coming days, weeks, months that we're living in now. I don't know. But you cannot have trust without accountability. Agreed. It just doesn't exist. And so, go ahead.
Well, no, I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead, please.
Oh, I just, when we were on the mountain, we were waiting for the good guys to show up. And this was before, the day before my mother was shot. What had happened with my little brother, we weren't 100% sure what the motivations were behind that situation. We were giving them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was an accident. We were talking about that as a family, and we were waiting for someone to come forward, the good guys, and say, let's figure this out without any more bloodshed. Like, we were waiting for the good guys to show up. My dad still had that faith that this can't be what it appears. Mm-hmm. And so when you call 911, you're waiting for the good guys to show up, period. You are in a terrible situation and you need help. And when you dial 911, you're waiting for the good guys. And so I support the good guys in law enforcement.
You can't Responsibility doesn't work when there are no consequences for your actions. Because if there are no consequences, if you're not going to reap what you sow, so to speak, if you're not going to prosper from your hard work, then there's no reason to work hard. If you're not going to have a consequence for a mistake or a bad decision, well, then there's nothing to keep you from doing it over and over and over. These things are very simple, and they apply whether you're in government service, walking down the road, helping somebody change a tire, whatever it may be. There's accountability associated with every single choice that we make. And it's as if we've inhabited a culture now that says, well, that's fine, but if you really don't like the outcome or if you really don't like the consequence for your action, well, we've got a government program for that, or we've got a safety net that we can put in place, or let's help you have a soft landing here because we really don't like the idea of these things happening to you. That's harsh. I am so over that. I couldn't state it any differently.
Without accountability, there's no trust. You know, and I know life isn't always black and white. Things that happen aren't always black and white. Car deaths, for example, there's a lot of gray area there, you know, with car accidents and how they happen. People make errors. We are not perfect, you know, and there has to be some sort of, but you can't just think that you can take life and there not be any accountability. Like, yeah, do you examine all of the angles, please, because we deserve that. Everyone deserves that. And then it's the difference, and I spoke on this in Coeur d'Alene when I shared my testimony. When terrible things happen, a lot of times our mouths cry justice when our hearts are screaming revenge.
Mm-hmm.
That's where your relationship with God comes in, and you really have to examine that. And that's something I had to examine in order to be able to overcome what happened to me. I was angry. I was so angry for so long. So angry. But that only takes you so far. And so I think we have to be careful, and we have to make a distinction between justice and revenge. And that's also where my forgiveness story comes into play. You know, and people don't like to talk about forgiveness, Michael. It is not a popular topic. It has never been something that anyone's beaten down my door to want to hear about. There are a very select few who've been through some very deep, terrible things that want to come out of it, and those are the ones that truly appreciate that message.
Mm-hmm.
But go ahead.
No, it's a hard concept to wrap your mind around. You think that it's just simple, just forgive them. Okay. Well, are you going to get up and harbor some ill will tomorrow? Are you going to see this and then hearken back to the way you were or the thoughts that you used to have? Are you going to let this infiltrate your subconscious and make impacts over the decisions and how you treat fellow human beings, or you're literally your next door neighbor that you're sideways with that you can't seem to forgive for that time they blew all their leaves in the fall over into your lawn? I mean, get real. That stuff happens with people, and their hearts harden, and they carry ideas and behavior forward that they had not to. So the concept of forgiveness sounds pretty darn simple, and it is much harder to apply properly and consistently adhere to. That is so tough.
Well, and
I'm not any good at it.
I'm not good at it either. You know, it's a choice I have to make sometimes daily. And I like to say it's like doing the laundry and the dishes. You have to do it over and over and over and over and over again. It doesn't stop. But it's not saying what happened is okay. And people, they equate forgiveness with saying, oh, well, you're just saying it's okay, then what happened? It's not. It's absolutely not. And it's not saying it's okay that you continue to allow it to happen. It is none of those things, but it is choosing your own personal freedom over being bound in anger and revenge. And it's keeping God on his throne in your life. Because when we are crying justice, but our hearts are screaming revenge, God, the Lord says, vengeance is mine. I will repay. Are we really going to take that out of his hands? I have a holy fear of that. And I think we should.
Well, people think, well, I'll just do what I want and I'll be free. You know, if I don't believe in the Lord or I don't, whatever else, I can just go about my business. It'll be fine. I'm like, no. You're bound by forces you can't possibly comprehend at any given moment. So your best option is to, or the option is to get your mind right, calibrate your heart, move forward, everything associated with that. So this idea that we're free of God's wrath or reprisal or those other things, that doesn't wash. I mean, I could probably argue an atheist and bring them around on at least some of that, because the idea that these things are part of the world, well, that's wrong. Let's say that there is no Almighty. We're just all guilty of group altruism when we're nice to one another. I mean, get out of here. So I appreciate these conversations, and I'm glad we're having them. So I don't know. I don't mean to sound dismissive to what you're saying. That's not at all what I am, Sarah. What I'm saying is I'm glad that you're willing to say it. I'm glad that people are willing to listen. I'm even more glad if they come around these things, because I've got news for you. If left to my own devices, oh man, what a mess I would make.
Mm-hmm. That's all of us, though.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's all of us. It's the human nature, you know, and God knows that. And it's been a week, Michael. I told you this before we started. My emotions this week, I think I cried for at least three of the days this week after watching Charlie lose his life so horrifically. And it's unnecessary.
You're right. You're right. It requires a great deal of resolve on our part, but we're also thankful. I mean, I don't know that many people that I've run across that didn't know who Charlie was, at least some, but most that I have run across and talked to knew a lot about Charlie, had listened to him speak a lot. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it was the Second Amendment realm. It doesn't matter if it's a First Amendment realm, his unashamed faith. Those aren't the points of contention. I'm glad that they had heard from him. I'm glad to know that they recognize him. I'm glad for them to see that he was willing to go into a relatively hostile, or at least an uncooperative atmosphere, primarily college campuses, that kind of thing, where there were a lot of people who obviously didn't share his beliefs or whatever else, and say, listen, let's talk about this. I'll debate you. I'll talk with you about it. We'll iron sharpen iron. I don't know. We'll work back and forth and we'll talk about these things. And I saw over a period of time him treat a lot of people very respectfully. I probably wouldn't have, or I've maybe not been able to do consistently. So I have an admiration for that. His work is not gone. It's still there. And I appreciate having it. I'd appreciate listening to it. I appreciate watching it. So that I am glad for. I'm glad that there are examples out there helping us with what's true of a thing and what isn't.
Yeah, he made an incredible impact. And so one of the things that really hurt me and still continues to hurt me is when what happened to my family happened, everyone had an opinion and they all had things to say about my family. And it was almost like one arrow after another just kept flying at us constantly. And so I don't like to speak a lot about someone's loss because it can be very painful. But Charlie was I was inspired by him.
Yeah.
I felt connected to him in a way that he reminded me of my little brother, Sam. Sam loved to dig for the truth. He loved history. He loved debating. He loved proving you wrong so that he could teach you truth. And I wanted to meet Charlie this side of heaven. I felt extremely proud of him for having the courage to do what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote something about him the other day. I wrote down that Charlie Kirk pointed people to God and challenged them to think for themselves. Greater love hath no man than this. He was willing to have a genuine face-to-face conversation with his enemy. And if you watch some of his videos, you can see the hateful things that they're just spewing at him. He was willing to have a face-to-face conversation with his quote-unquote enemy, whether it was enemy of ideas or whatever you want to call it, to plead with them to examine self-destructive ideologies and to pull them higher. He wanted to pull them higher than where they were at. Basically, if you look at it from a biblical standpoint, snatching them from the fire is what we would say as Christians. He was snatching people from the fire. And half of the world right now, I feel, recognizes the sacrificial love in that, because I feel that's a sacrificial love when you're willing to put yourself out there to debate with someone who literally spews hate at you in order to pull them higher. And it's just sad to me that half of the world doesn't recognize that. But that half of the world is who Charlie was fighting for. And I think we need to remember that.
Yeah, you're right about that. And the funny thing about it is Charlie understood the same thing that you and I do, that yes, he was battling on behalf of the truth, but he was hoping very much and praying very much that those people woke up to the truth, that they saw the light, and that's what they ended up wanting to follow. I have no doubt that he did a bang-up job for a lot of people, and I did. Some of those people that stood up there and took their time in line to wait and had things to say, like you said, some of it was pretty ugly, some of it wasn't. But I have no doubt that there are many people, because I could watch the responses that they gave and see the looks on their face where they changed or at least paused and stopped to think about what had been said. And I absolutely delighted in that. I was very, very cool to watch that. That doesn't necessarily mean that I've got the guts or the wherewithal to walk into the enemy's realm, so to speak, and debate like that. But maybe I had ought to. But it was good watching him, and it was very, very good watching some of the outcomes, and I appreciated that. So I hope it meant something to those folks too. I really do. I have no doubt it did to some.
Oh, I think he changed hundreds of thousands of people just in an instant. And that's amazing. Mm-hmm. Like, that is something really to be it's just amazing. And I really hope the good that he was trying to put out into the world is how people change, and that just becomes a ripple effect and not the other way. Something I had to really... Oh, go ahead.
No, I blurted it out there real quickly. I apologize. We could be a force multiplier for whatever we want. So it's going to be good or evil. You need to choose.
You hit the nail on the head.
Is that the mic drop moment? Is that where we end this thing or what? I usually don't come off very profound, so I'm glad you're here. Thank you for your inspiration, Sarah. I usually meander my way through a podcast or a video and usually do okay. But again, thank you for kind of guiding and leading us through this, because we started off with some things that tripped me up just a little bit, and it was very hard there for a little bit. So thank you for offering guiding principles through this discussion very, very much. I appreciate
You know
your
what,
candor.
Michael? It takes a good interviewer for me to open up, and it takes a good interviewer for me to be able to share. And so, trust me when I say this is one of the better interviews I have had in my experiences. Okay. So, just being a real person that you can have a real conversation with is refreshing.
Fantastic. Thank you. It was very, very kind of you to say that. So that harkens us back. We would have you on regardless. So thank you for coming on. But everybody keep in mind, February 10th, 2026, Sarah and her husband are traveling to town. They're going to be available for us. Talk with us at the Second Amendment Day at the Iowa Capitol. That's an afternoon program. And then that evening, you'll be able to buy tickets to the IFC-PAC supper. And have a little bit more intimate conversation with Sarah. Meet, say hello. Now, keep in mind, she's bringing things like her books, and she's bringing some of those things and the wherewithal. So if you're wanting to pick some of those things up and get them signed, have a little personalization, if you will, those things will all be available. We want you to keep that in mind. And like we mentioned earlier, rubyridgetofreedom.com is the website. You can go there and pick some of these things up. I've seen them for sale other places that you have them retailed as well. But thank you for that. We're looking forward to that.
We're looking forward to it as well. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person.
It'll be great. It'll be great. You're going to come back to an area where there's a lot of really good people that are welcoming and they want to see you now. It's not, we may be able to get as much cold as where you're at in Montana, but I don't know if we'll get as much snow. So I can't guarantee that. Like I said, I'm thinking sunny and 60s, but I don't know if that's what we'll get.
I think Iowa can match us in the winter storm area. They just don't have the mountains you have to climb. And
yeah, I know. It's kind of funny. I want to say of the last 5 IFC-2A days, it's been a blizzard or near blizzard conditions. I think one of them we did okay, but the others were terrible. This last year, I think the wind chill was like -9 or 11 or something like that. It was very cold. So the law of averages dictates that it can't be that bad all the time. So maybe you should bring the good weather with you. I don't know.
I'm going to trust God for good weather.
Okay, I can handle that. That's fantastic. I'll jump in there. Okay, Sara Weaver, rubyridgetofreedom.com. She's going to come in town and share with us. Thank you for sharing today. There's lots more to discuss. There's lots more to think about and its impact on not only the Second Amendment, but beyond that with what we do, how we interact, how we touch other people. We're looking forward to that February 10th in 2026. Sarah, anything else before we go?
Just Godspeed, Michael.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
God bless.